It's a new season of The Liz Wheeler Show. What this show won't be: boring, old, ineffectual commentary. Go tune into Fox if you want the generic political yammering that got us into this mess. Small assumptions allow big lies. So The Liz Wheeler Show will challenge everything. On this show, it's be based or our country dies. What does it mean to be based? Stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody, to The Liz Wheeler Show. True fans will recognize this microphone right here. You will be able to identify whose seat I am so privileged to be sitting in today. Drop it in the comments if you recognize where I am and why I might be where I am using this microphone today. We have a good show for you today. This is what we have coming up. Lauren Chen reached out to me in the spring of last year about her new media company. She actually offered me a job there. And I'm going to tell you about that phone call because it took me about 60, maybe 90 seconds to smell a rat to realize that this was a fishy deal and to turn it down. But this has been quite the story in the last week. So we're going to talk about that whole thing. It was pretty easy to see it was a scam right off, especially given the amount of money that she was offering to prominent conservative media personalities to come and work for Tenet Media instead of wherever they were currently broadcasting from. If this is Russian interference, let's just say it's pretty bad Russian interference. We're going to talk about all that and more. We're also going to do some debate prep for President Trump for tomorrow. Tomorrow, President Trump and Kamala Harris are going to get on that debate stage and they're going to go at it. I don't know about you. I'm pretty excited about it. I really like this kind of political showboating that happens at debates. I find it entertaining. A little painful, but entertaining. But we have some advice for Trump, and we're going to talk about exactly what Kamala's strategy is going to be because it's very obvious exactly how Kamala is going to behave on that stage. And if Trump is aware of what Kamala is going to do ahead of time, he can very effectively counter that. We're also going to talk to Seth Dillion on the show today. He's going to join us, a very special guest, to talk about Tucker Carlson hosted a controversial, quote-unquote, historian named Darryl Cooper who made some bombastic claims about World War II. When Seth Dillion challenged these assertions that Darryl Cooper made on Tucker Carlson's show, Tucker Carlson came after Seth Dillion rather viscerally. So we are going to continue that conversation today with Seth here in a couple minutes. Also, did you guys hear about the Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio, who are decapitating ducks and eating them? I hope President Trump brings that up on the debate stage tomorrow night when he's talking to Kamala Harris. We have video of that in case you haven't seen it. Also, you asked for final points to be brought back. Final points are back, baby. A prominent exorcist says there are 5 demons who are controlling our culture right now. And when you hear what the demons are, according to this exorcist, it's quite chilling. Also, exciting news, the Liz Wheeler newsletter is launching tomorrow. So go to lizwheelernewsletter.com to sign up for that. I'm very proud of it. I'm very excited for you to see it. And it's dropping tomorrow. lizwheelernewsletter.com. So as we always do, we are going to start the show with a prayer. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in this battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the other evil spirits who prowl through the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. Today's show is powered by First Cup Coffee. Go to firstcup.com, use my promo code Liz, and you can get 10% off your order. I need 10 of you today. If you've ever thought about trying this delicious coffee, go to firstcup.com, use my promo code Liz for 10% off your order. Our show is also sponsored today by American Hartford Gold, one of our most loyal partners. And my goodness, what a pertinent time for them to be talking to you about your money, because in all the time that we have been alive, the US dollar, we've always been able to count on it. It's always been solid, but that may not be the case much longer. Its descent may already have begun. The US dollar is facing unprecedented inflation. Our politics is getting increasingly unstable, and if that wasn't scary enough, the government's now going to try to introduce this new digital dollar in order to control us. That's why it's never been more important to take control of your wealth. Don't let your life savings, your retirement accounts, become a casualty of failing banks or currency wars or asinine globalist politicians. Now is the time to call the only precious metal dealer that I trust, American Hartford Gold. They'll show you how to protect your savings, your retirement accounts by diversifying your wealth portfolio with physical gold and silver. My husband and I just did this. Highly recommend it. American Hartford Gold also supports content like this. Content that is committed to bringing you the truth. Tell them I sent you, and they'll give you up to $15,000 of free silver on your first order. So call them now. You can click the link in the description of this episode, or you can call 866-996-5172. That's 866-996-5172, or text Liz to 998899. Again, the phone number is 866-996-5172, or text Liz to 998899. So, my friends, after Roe v. Wade fell, the abortion industry radically changed their tactics. You probably noticed this. Today, their top scheme is brainwashing the most vulnerable minds in our country. That's right, young people. Planned Parenthood and their cronies target college, high school, and even middle school students through academic indoctrination, social media algorithms, and downright lies. In fact, listen to this statistic. 9 in 10 Planned Parenthood abortion facilities are within walking distance of a college campus. But you can help stop these merchants of death from poisoning the heart of your child or your grandchild before it's too late. It's why I'm partnering with Students for Life of America. I need you to get your free copy of their amazing new guidebook. It's called 10 Ways to Keep Your Kids Pro-Life. Go to studentsforlife.org/Liz right now. The booklet gives you step-by-step instructions to ensure that your young loved one doesn't get ensnared by the pro-abortion left, or worse, doesn't abort their child. Students for Life is the only national organization galvanizing the next generation to stand against the evils of abortion. Go to studentsforlife.org/Liz to get your free guidebook now. That's studentsforlife.org/Liz. All right. The story of the day today and the base take on it is this. We're going to talk about Lauren Chen. We're going to talk about Tenet Media. We're going to talk about the conservative personalities, Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, who were ensnared in this massive alleged deception. First of all, I'm going to tell you what happened. Last week, the Department of Justice unveiled an indictment of 2 foreign nationals, 2 Russian citizens. The allegation in this indictment was that these Russian citizens were operating a foreign influence campaign here in the United States to try to impact the outcome of the 2024 presidential election. And the way that these Russian nationals were trying to influence the outcome of the election was through one specific media company, a media company called Tenet Media. Tenet Media is owned by Lauren Chen and her husband, Liam Donovan. Their names are not stated in the indictment, but it's pretty obvious that they are founder number 1 and founder number 2 of the company that is referenced in the indictment, which would be Tenet Media. And ensnared in this indictment are conservative personalities who were offered pretty large sums of money by Lauren Chen and her husband to come work for Tenet Media, or at least to produce content for Tenet Media, or license their existing content to Tenet Media. These conservative personalities, as I mentioned, Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, Dave Rubin, are some of the most prominent personalities. And I'm going to start at the beginning here, because back in June of 2023, Lauren Chen also reached out to me and offered me the same deal that these conservative personalities, or at least a version of the same deal, everybody's contract is different, offered me a deal to come create content for Tenet Media. And after about 60 seconds on the phone hearing her pitch of what Tenet Media was and who was funding it, where this humongous amount of money that she was offering came from, I smelled a rat and I ultimately turned it down. I'm going to tell you about that phone call in a minute. But first, I want to say, if the allegations in this indictment are true, and I believe in the presumption of innocence until proven guilty, but if these allegations are true, then taking money from Russia to propagate talking points that are sponsored by the Russian government is gross. That should be pretty obvious to everybody. The content creators have since claimed that they're victims. Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, Dave Rubin have claimed they were victims. They said that they did not know where the money came from, that they had full editorial control over the content they were producing to Tenet Media, and that they were victims in this scheme. That seems, based on what we know about the scenario right now, it seems true. It seems, at least this is the only evidence we have, that Lauren Chen was the only person who had gotten directives to say specific things about specific topics from her Russian handlers. It doesn't seem like there was any talking points disseminated to anybody else. Maybe there was, but there's no evidence of that at this point. But here's what I will say. When I got on the phone with Lauren Chen that day in June, she proposed, she didn't actually say that she was the owner of this company. She told me that she was the face of the company, the spokesperson of the company, and that the goal of this company was to hire many prominent conservative media personalities, the top conservative media personalities, to produce content for them because they wanted to be a legitimate competitor in the space. They wanted to compete with The Blaze. They wanted to compete with the Daily Wire. They wanted to compete with the biggest, most prominent, most influential media companies in the country. And to do that, they wanted to hire high-profile conservatives to give legitimacy to their brand. And she said straight up within the first couple minutes of this phone call that they were looking to double the salaries of conservative media personalities. Now, you can see that I'm laughing here because to say that it's a dime a dozen to get a phone call as a conservative media personality from someone claiming to start a new media company would be the understatement of the year. These calls are not infrequent. The offers from startups are extended and rescinded quite frequently because a lot of times what happens with these startups, not to go off on a tangent here, is in order to get funding from investors, you have to promise them that you'll be able to have a prominent media personality attached to your company. But in order to attach that media personality, you have to have funding. So it's this weird back and forth. You never know exactly what happens. But when I said to Lauren Chen, doubling the salaries for double the content, and she said, no, less than the content that you're making now. I said, okay, well, where's the money coming from? And she's like, oh, well, we have an investor, a financier. And I said, oh, who is it? And she gave me a name. And the name that she gave me was Eduardo Gregorian. Now, you might remember if you read the DOJ indictment that Eduardo Gregorian is actually a fictitious character that was invented. I don't know whether it was invented by Lauren Chen and her husband or whether it was invented by their Russian handlers, but it's this fictitious character that was invented to mask the reality that this money was coming from Russia. And I said, Eduardo Gregorian, okay, where does he make his money? Who is this guy? I've never heard of him. And to my recollection, she didn't give me an answer. And I recall Googling him and not being able to find evidence, even a shred of a footprint online, which in this day and age is completely unrealistic. And so I said, you know what? I'm good. Thanks. Goodbye. Because that's very important to know where the money's coming from. And so all of these people, Tim Pool and Benny Johnson and Dave Rubin and anybody else, I'm not going to say anything negative about these people. These people are my friends in the industry. I think that they have been a net positive on the movement, and I think they'll continue to be. This is but a blip in their very assumedly long careers. It's mostly a headache for them right now, and that's about it. But I will say, it is very easy not to look a gift horse in the mouth. It's very easy if someone offers you something that seems too good to be true to take it without looking. But let me tell you, if something seems like it's too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. And you absolutely should follow the money. There's a reason that that's a cliche. Follow the money, look into this. And when you're looking at that amount of money, I think it's very easy to say, I'd rather have that money and I'd rather you just not tell me where this money is coming from because I'd rather use that money for myself. But it was pretty obvious that this was sketch from the first about 90 seconds of this. Now, the other thing that I will say is all of this, it's very correct and proper to distrust the Biden Department of Justice and the Southern District of New York. Two things can be true at once. If the allegations are true and that Lauren Chen and her husband took Russian money for some kind of Barney Fife style election interference, that's wrong, but it's also a political hit job from the Biden Department of Justice. And this is what I mean. The Biden Department of Justice is corrupt. The Biden Department of Justice has been weaponized many times against conservatives just because they're conservative. We know that the entire Biden administration views conservatives, Christians, especially Catholics, pro-lifers, pro-family, pro-parental rights advocates as literal terrorists. And they use this lawfare to try to frighten and imprison and silence their political enemies. Those things can both be true at the same time. In fact, the Southern District of New York, in an undercover sting, actually admitted that all the cases that they had brought against President Trump are in fact political cases. Take a look at this.
The whole thing is disgusting. They're just out to get them.
And that's why the surging of the violence it's a perversion of justice. You're stacking charges and rearranging things just to make it fit a case. No, to be honest with you, I think the case is nonsense.
State levels are Wild West. They're like idiots. They don't care. They're all political.
That's from the Biden Department of Justice, Southern District of New York. So that can be true. Now, there's also major major double standards when it comes to actual foreign influence in our election and in our country. I'm talking like Hunter Biden. How much money did Ukraine give to Hunter Biden? Why? So that they could have access to Joe Biden when he was vice president. I mean, you want to talk about foreign influence and huge amounts of money going to influence the vice president of the United States. The Southern District of New York sure doesn't care about that. Same with Tim Walz's connections to China. Do we not care that the man who is the vice presidential running mate of Kamala Harris is really, really buddy to the Chinese Communist Party? Their foreign influence peddling abounds. Let's just say that. I'm not trying to dismiss Russian election interference attempts, but what I will say is we should ask ourselves, why did the Department of Justice unveil this indictment now? It's not because they're worried about actual election interference. It is a political hit job to try to smear all right-wing media figures as, are they Russian puppets? Are they speaking? But Vladimir Putin is whispering talking points in their ear. Can you believe anything you hear from the right-wing media? Because we, as a group, are so effective at countering the hegemony of the mainstream media, they have to hurl false accusations against us collectively in order to try to discredit us. I mean, honestly, if these allegations are true and this is how Russia was trying to interfere in the 2024 presidential election, it's almost laughable. Like Barney Fife level incompetence. Do you really think that this is, like, what difference are you trying to make? I actually, when I read this, I was like, okay, but what's the goal here? Like, assuming for a second, just entertaining the premise that this is true, what would Russia be trying to accomplish by having Dave Rubin and Tim Pool on their payroll? Especially if they weren't even given talking points. Sure, it was intended, the big names were intended to give legitimacy to the Tenet brand. I get that. But if their purpose was just to stoke divisiveness and unrest in America, because the more chaotic America is, the less strong we are, the weaker we are on the international stage, and that benefits Putin. I mean, first of all, that's a stretch. But second of all, Dave Rubin, he and I have been friends for a long time, and we don't agree on many issues. But to call the guy divisive, I mean, I don't think that I've ever seen him film a show with anything other than a happy-go-lucky smile on his face. He's not throwing out bombastic hot takes. He's not taking edgy opinions in a lot of the main, in a lot of the most divisive topics. Like, he's not that divisive. So if they were trying to stoke unrest by promoting domestic chaos, by funding bombastic commentators, like, really, him? That's what you chose? As I said, all I can picture is, like, Barney Fife trying to, like, creep around to solve a crime. Just not a very good job by Russia. If, again, I believe in the presumption of innocence, if, in fact, these allegations are true. But let's talk about the creepiest aspect of this, and then we're going to move on here to debate stuff. The creepiest aspect of this is this indictment from the Department of Justice was the result of spying by the deep state. All of this information was collected because the Department of Justice was snooping on the communications of Lauren Chen and everyone associated with Lauren Chen. I'm talking about emails, IP addresses, text messages, phone calls. It was wiretapping. And the reason that they were, quote unquote, allowed to do that was because Congress reauthorized FISA, which had already been weaponized against conservatives during the first Trump campaign. So thanks to Congress, this was allowed to happen. And by the way, even Republicans in Congress voted yes on this, even though we all told them not to do it. So if you've ever texted Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, Dave Rubin, Lauren Chen, the Department of Justice has got their eye on you. They're spying on you. They're collecting your information and the things you say. Thanks to FISA. Thanks to Congress, even Republicans. All right, guys, Seth Dillion of the Babylon Bee is joining us on the show here in just a second. What we're going to talk about today is Tucker Carlson hosted when I call him controversial, that might be the understatement of the year, a controversial so-called historian named Darryl Cooper on his show last week. The video, at least on X, has gotten like 35, 40 million views, some astronomical number. And the reason that this got so many views and the reason this guy's controversial is because he made some accusations or allegations about World War II. Among which he said that Winston Churchill, was the main villain of World War II. Just revisionist, absolutely insane, provably false allegations that you really wouldn't just make if you were dumb. You'd probably only make that if you're worldview was tinged with some kind of poisonous ideology. And listen, we're going to talk about exactly what is happening in the conservative movement in a couple minutes, because there are some, how do I even phrase this? Conservatives, by and large, have understood better than ever in the past couple years that we need to challenge everything, that the institutions that we counted on in our lives up until this point, maybe we shouldn't have counted on them. Maybe they're corrupted. And we've started to challenge everything. I mean, the thesis of this show is challenge everything. And that's good. That's good because we're doing that in pursuit of the truth. But there's a difference between challenging everything and outright rejecting everything. If you challenge everything and you're a fair-minded person, then in some cases, you're going to come to the conclusion that, yes, the assumption was correct. Like gravity. I could challenge gravity, but then I would find that, yeah, gravity is real. But if you just reject gravity outright because you think everything is corrupt, then you're going to be a true science denier. So I think there are some people in the conservative movement right now who are taking it a step too far. They're not just challenging everything, they're rejecting everything. And the point of challenging everything isn't actually to tear everything down. The point of challenging everything is to find the truth. And if you are not looking for the truth, then you risk tearing down the truth itself. And so that's what I want to bring in Seth for. Because Seth continued the conversation that Darryl Cooper had with Tucker Carlson on his podcast by challenging some of the assertions that Darryl Cooper made when he was on that show. And in response to Seth challenging Darryl Cooper, Tucker came after Seth and accused Seth of trying to silence him. So Seth, hopefully I explained that correctly.
Yeah.
You can tell me.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure where to begin. I mean, I didn't really address a lot of Cooper's claims directly. I mocked Tucker for his handling of the whole thing, because Tucker had this guy on, which is fine. He can have whoever he wants to have on his show on. But the guy did make some outrageous claims. He was clearly, offering this like revisionist take on World War II and trying to recast it as if, Churchill was, as he, in his words, the chief villain of the whole thing. And Tucker started the whole thing off by praising him, like very dramatically, effusively, just saying, you're the, I don't want to, gush, but you're like the greatest and best historian and scholar the world has ever known and stuff like that. Like that was how he introed this guy, and then was very soft on him. There was no pushback whatsoever, no effort to bring other, things into the equation or the picture, like some of Hitler's known aggression and intentions and actions that he had taken up to that point before Churchill was even in the picture. Nothing to really push back, and so it seemed like he was agreeing with and actively promoting this guy's ideology. So I mocked that. Tucker came to me with the complaint that I had slandered him. He suggested that I had called him. I suggested that he was a Nazi, and I didn't do that. I didn't suggest that he was a Nazi. What I did suggest was that he spoke to and seemingly agreed with and praised someone who's a Hitler apologist. Right. And I stand by that.
That seems pretty obvious. That's just objective observation.
Yeah, and a lot of people are saying, well, what do you mean he's a Hitler apologist? He didn't say anything he didn't praise Hitler. He criticized Churchill, and while there's some truth to that, the point that I've tried to make is that in order to vilify Churchill the way that they want to, you have to downplay and ignore and whitewash Hitler. You can't, if you allow Hitler to really be Hitler the way that the overwhelming evidence shows who and what he was and what he wanted, then Churchill's not the chief villain. The only way you can accomplish that narrative is by downplaying Hitler. So even if you don't say anything, a lot of times it's what you don't say. It's the selective choosing of details to cover and not cover. But in this whole conversation about who is the chief villain of World War II, they didn't even explicitly mention the Holocaust or Hitler's genocidal intentions, which are clearly, historical. So that was interesting. That omission is really interesting. That's the kind of omission someone who's trying to apologize for Nazis or Hitler would make. So the whole thing was really interesting. But when Tucker came, to me saying that I had slandered him, I said, well, where? What statement did I make that you consider slander? Because that's false and malicious. And I didn't say anything false or malicious. I gave my opinion, about how you were soft on this guy. And what he then did was go on Charlie Kirk's show and talk about how I had come at him. I had texted him, outraged. How could you platform this man, And I was shocked when I saw that, because I'm like, that literally never happened. I did not say those words. I used the word platformed, but in a very different context. I said, Tucker, look, you can platform and praise whoever you want, but if you have somebody like that on your show, you're going to get backlash. Don't go accusing those people of slandering you if you're going to do that, because that's what you literally did. That was the context in which I used that phrase. I even explicitly defended his platforming in that private conversation by saying, look, you have a right to give an interview to anybody. That's your choice. Just be ready for the backlash if you're going to agree with a guy like that. So what Tucker was doing there was trying to suggest, and he used the word anti-woke to describe me. He acted like he didn't know me. He's like, Seth Dillon, this anti-woke guy, I guess, was texting me and saying, I can't believe you platformed Cooper. Trying to suggest that, publicly, in the public-facing eye, I'm pro-free speech and anti-woke, but privately I'm, trying to push for censorship and control who goes on Tucker's show. And that's just false. It's not the case. So that was an interesting kind of little spat back and forth there.
Well, one of the things I think is interesting is the point of podcasting, and maybe even what makes podcasting different than broadcasting, is that there are conversations that are had in longer form compared to cable news. And the point of that, I thought, was to spark conversations. So Tucker had this conversation. His defense was, I just had a conversation with this guy. Okay, have a conversation with him. But isn't the point of having that conversation, the point would either be two different things. It would be to promote the guy's views or to challenge his views. You don't just have someone on to have a conversation without a point. Like, I invited you on. I'm not just being like, okay, Seth, how is it down there in Florida today? Like, what's going on with your day? Like, no, I had you come on to talk about this specific topic because I want people to think about what's happening, A, among the right with some of these viewpoints, but B, about what it means to continue a debate versus to call for censorship. Because it seems to me, there really is this not so healthy idea among many people on the right that if you criticize them, you should be destroyed.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a playbook now. This is something that we're seeing a lot with conservative commentators, is they come out with a very provocative guest or a very provocative claim, and then the objections start rolling in, and people are like, outraged by what was said and how the conversation went. And then they treat those objections as if they are an effort to silence and suppress some deep and mysterious truth that they're the only ones bold enough to go and try and uncover. And so these objections are treated as an effort to suppress and silence, when really the objections are actually part of the conversation. The provocative guest was the start of a conversation. The outraged responses are the continuation of that conversation. It's more speech and an answer to the speech that was out there. And yeah, it is certainly unhealthy when it's treated as this effort to silence and suppress. It's really trying to have their cake and eat it too in a number of ways. It's trying to have their cake and eat it too, because if they go unchallenged and unchecked, their narrative just gets out there and it's promoted, and it's unchallenged and unchecked. That's a win. But then if it's challenged and checked, then it's meant to suggest that, it must be true, because look at the hysterical response, and look, this is a forbidden topic we're not allowed to talk about. Look at how angry everybody is. But I think that's absurd. The responses are from people who care about the truth just as much as the people who are on there spouting their nonsense. And so it's because they care about the truth that they're responding, and they're responding with more speech. The rebuttals in this particular debate between Tucker and Cooper, some claims were made that were pretty outrageous, and a lot of historians have weighed in. The Free Press has published several articles on this. Historians Victor Davis Hanson and Niall Ferguson, and there's been a few others who have published pieces in response to the claims that were made, thoroughly debunking and rebutting them. So that's a debate. That's literally a debate, not censorship. So it's a tactic. It's a ploy, and I don't agree with it. And I certainly don't agree with the attempt to suggest that my objections to the content of the debate or Tucker's response to his guest amount to me saying or suggesting or even implying that he never should have had this guest on. Oh, I can't believe you allowed this man to speak. My position is very clear, both publicly and privately. More speech, not less. Bring out the bad ideas, put them on display for everyone, let everyone hear them, and then let's refute them and ridicule them and deal with them the proper way. I am not for censorship, and I'm not texting you telling you who should go on your show and trying to censor who your guests are. That's not who I am.
No, I know. And I also think, as a conservative commentator who has faced actual censorship, I do not like when other conservative media personalities pretend that they are facing censorship when they're really just facing disagreement or dissent from other people, because there's a very real problem of censorship in our country. And if we cry censorship when it's not real, then it's going to have the effect of the boy who cried wolf. And we are not going to, it's going to desensitize everybody when actual censorship happens. So it's in a sense playing into the, the left.
When we were locked out of Twitter, that was an example of censorship.
Yeah.
A joke that we made was considered hateful conduct and we were forced to delete it or lose our account. That's real censorship. Not if we tweet something and it gets backlash and people are mad at us or, making fun of us or something like that. It's not like, I've said something forbidden. Look at me. I'm a victim. You said something provocative and people responded. That's called speech.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, during COVID, I got locked out of my YouTube channel for weeks at a time for questioning whether the COVID vaccine mandate was legal and whether the COVID vax itself was something that should be given the amount of times that Fauci was telling everybody to get it. That's censorship. And also, I'm glad you brought up the Victor Davis Hanson piece on Free Press, because that's what I was going to direct people towards. If you're interested in hearing the truth about World War II and a refutation of the claims Darryl Cooper made on Tucker Carlson, that's a really good piece. I actually hope Tucker has Victor Davis Hanson on the show. He also has an open invitation to come on this show. I would love to talk to him about it. But Seth, I really appreciate you being here today.
Yeah. By the way, I did text Tucker and say, look, as a Christian, I'm all about reconciliation. I don't want to have a beef with anybody. If you've got a problem with me and you have a problem with something that I've said, let's talk about it. Call me. I don't have that call yet. I haven't received it yet, but if I do, that would be a positive outcome.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also a little bit of an uncomfortable position for a lot of conservatives because Tucker is a net positive on our society by leaps and bounds. Probably 95%, huge net benefit to society, to our country, to the entire world, to humanity. But then, when he hosts people like this and starts a kerfuffle where it's okay if we dissent, then all of a sudden that makes us somehow the villain or calling for censorship. That's not. I don't like that. I want us to be able to talk about it. That's why we're talking about it today.
He's not benefiting the Trump campaign right now. He's not benefiting them. This, I think, has been a net negative for them.
Well, I guess we'll see tomorrow. All right, Seth, thanks for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, let's talk about debate stuff. So the debate is tomorrow between Trump and Kamala. They finally agreed on the terms of this debate. By the way, you should tune in to blazetv.com/Liz because we are going to be doing live coverage and it's going to be a ton of fun. Here are some quick thoughts on this debate. This is some advice for President Trump and some analysis of what he should expect from Kamala Harris. So there are a few things that Trump should do and a few things he shouldn't do. And there are some very specific ways that he should respond to the obvious lines of attack that Kamala Harris is going to take. Kamala Harris is going to pretend to be a girl boss. That's going to be her presentation. You remember when she says to Mike Pence, "I'm speaking," and all these like drunk 40-year-old women everywhere were like, "Oh, you go, girl." That's what she's going to try to do. That's why her campaign reneged on their agreement that the mics would be off and then wanted the mics on so that she can interrupt Trump and be like, "I'm speaking. Don't interrupt. Look at my strength. I have to prove it to you on the stage." She's also going to try to hurl fact checks in real time. Fact checks, quote unquote, in real time. She's going to pretend to be a prosecutor. She's going to ask Donald Trump a question, not give him time to respond and ask him another question. And as long as Trump is prepared for this just should be, she's basically the easiest person in politics to debate because she's extremely radically left. She has a proven track record that shows that she is way out of step with the American people and what we want for our country. And she's just not very good on her feet. But this is how her demeanor is going to be. So what Trump should do to defeat this is, first of all, she's going to try to personally aggravate him to provoke him into a response. So just go into the night, walk onto that stage, knowing that you are not going to be triggered. Just let anything that she says that tries to personally trigger you, just let it roll off your back. You can get her on Twitter later. Don't do it on the debate stage because there will be a lot of independent voters watching. They don't always like the reaction when you are personally triggered. Stay on message. You have every single policy on your side on the stage in the country. Every single policy on your side. So all you have to do is respond to everything she says with a fact that the American people, a fact about Kamala that the American people don't like, and a fact about your policies that they do. Be tough, Don't try to pander to independent voters, but generally be pleasant. So this is what I mean. I'll give you a specific example here. On abortion, which is perhaps the primary topic that Kamala Harris is running on, it's certainly a foundational aspect of her campaigning to independent voters and to women specifically. President Trump should be very clear, no matter what she says about reproductive rights, no matter what she says about Roe v. Wade, he should ask her, do you want abortion to be legal until the moment of birth? Do you want abortion to be legal until the moment of birth? And he should repeat that to her. Repeat it. Because even though you probably will not draw the truth out of her, you will be putting into the minds of all of the viewers the reality that, yes, Kamala Harris wants abortion until the moment of birth. And 80% of our country, that includes people who identify as pro-choice, do not want that. They want late-term abortion to be illegal. And if you say those two things, ask that question, and then show Kamala Harris to be out of step with regular people, then you are showing the American people that she is extreme, radical, and that it's grotesque. He should look at her, and he should say, you are sitting with a Kermit Gosnells. And then he should look at the camera, and he should say, Google Kermit Gosnell. That's the type of thing that Kamala Harris supports. And by the way, she'll come back and say, late-term abortion doesn't happen that often. No, the CDC says it happens up to 30,000 times a year. Think about how many kindergarten classrooms of children it takes to get to 30,000 slaughtered by late-term abortion. And the reason, by the way, that women get late-term abortion is not because of fetal abnormalities or potential risk to the health of the mother. If you look at studies, even from the Guttmacher Institute, which is an arm of Planned Parenthood, so very sympathetic to the pro-abortion view, studies show, surveys of women who have aborted their babies late term show that the reason that they get those late term abortions are mostly reasons of convenience, that less than 10% of the time it is for life of the mother or for fetal abnormalities. Likewise, Trump should just emphasize life is precious. We want to do everything we can to support life and protect it. And then, of course, Kamala is going to call him a convicted felon probably about 100 times. This is something that they have focus grouped and they have found to be a successful talking point. So, of course, she's especially presenting herself as a prosecutor. She's going to portray him as a felon. And this is how Trump should respond. He shouldn't actually engage in almost any of the details of the cases because they're so convoluted. He, of course, is the victim of this lawfare. There's no doubt about that. But the cases are so convoluted that unless you're familiar with them or unless you've followed along with them, it's not going to be easy to explain that in a digestible soundbite to American voters who aren't familiar with it. So this is what he should say. And he should say it like this. He should say, Kamala Harris, do you agree with the Supreme Court of the United States that the vaccine mandate that came from the Biden and Harris administration is illegal? Now, if Kamala Harris says, yes, she agrees with the Supreme Court, then she agrees that she tried to coerce you into getting the COVID vax under penalty of being fired from your job if you declined it. And if she says, no, I don't agree with the Supreme Court, then she thinks that she has the legal right to do that as vice president, which means that she would do things like that as president. That's every time he should bring that up because COVID was not that long ago. The COVID tyranny was not that long ago. People need to be reminded of the role that Kamala Harris played in that. And I guarantee you that will play well. When she calls him a dictator or an authoritarian and brings up he wanted to terminate the Constitution, which again is a lie, but it's a longer explanation of why it's a lie, and people will remember only the talking point. It's why the left so often wins the war of talking points, because they lie in short little sound bites, and the explanation of why that's a lie is a little bit longer. But all she has to say, calling him a dictator, all President Trump has to say is, were you elected by Democrat voters to be the Democrat nominee? Or did they democratically vote for the man that you staged a coup against? Because that's anti-democracy. And anti-democracy is tyranny, is dictatorship. That's all he should say every time. Same thing with border security. He should ask her, as border czar, when you were tasked by President Biden, even recognized by Congress as being the border czar, did you visit the border? Why not? She did not visit the border. And he should ask her, how many illegal aliens have crossed the border during the Biden-Harris administration? How many terrorists? There's reported 400 terrorists who have crossed the border from an ISIS-connected smuggling network. And at least 50 of them are just at large in our country. And he should ask her, do you wonder what they're doing or where they are? Because the American people wonder. The same with inflation. He should ask the American people, how much do your gas and groceries cost right now? He should ask Kamala, because she probably doesn't know, how much are you paying for gas right now? How much do you pay for groceries? And what did you pay when I was president? He should remember that part of defeating Kamala Harris isn't actually getting her to admit something or defeating her as a person. It's proving to the people watching that his policies are better. Same with the Black Lives Matter riots. He should say your tweet asking people to donate to the Minnesota Freedom Fund, which bailed out of jail violent criminals who torched Minneapolis, is still posted on X to this day. Do you stand by asking people to give money to bail out someone who was in prison for domestic violence who went on to shoot someone? And he should point up to the American people. Same with the war, the Ukraine war. Do you want to send more of our money to Ukraine? Because this is what's causing gas and grocery prices to go up in our country, because you are sending more of our money to Ukraine and the American people don't support that. Asking questions is key. Staying on message, staying disciplined will get Kamala Harris better than going off onto rally-style tangents, which are entertaining at rallies, but not the place on the debate stage. I think President Trump's going to do good. I'm excited to watch. Go to blazetv.com/Liz. If you use my promo code Liz30, you can get $30 off your annual subscription, and you can watch our live debate coverage. It's going to be fun. All right. It is now time for 5 headlines. This is some of the craziest headlines. I know we always pull together what we consider to be the craziest of headlines, but this might take the cake. In Ohio, in Springfield, Ohio, and just for context, this is about 40 minutes from where I grew up in Ohio. I grew up outside of Cincinnati. In Springfield, Ohio, there are Haitian migrants that have been reported to be decapitating ducks and eating them. Yes, you heard that correct. Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio are decapitating ducks and eating them. What are we, in a third world country? This is what happens when you import the third world into the suburbs of the Midwest of the United States of America, and that there's no requirement for assimilation. Take a look at this video. These are locals in Springfield, Ohio, complaining to the government about what they are dealing with now. Take a look at this.
I'm 28 years old, and I'm a social media influencer, and I just be on TikTok and stuff. I do YouTube. I think it's like kind of odd that like a guy like me has to come out from doing what I do on a daily basis to have fun, because I see what's going on in these streets, and I see you guys just sitting up there in them comfy chairs and suits, and I'm getting out here every day, and I'm broadcasting this, and you guys are just sitting up there in suits or something. Like, I really challenge you guys to get out here and do something. These Haitians are running into trash cans. They're running into buildings. They're running into... they flipping cars in the middle of the street.
Who is that guy?
What I'm seeing, it is so unsafe in my neighborhood anymore. I have the homeless that were trying to camp out, and I have made concessions with them, and I try to help them the best I can to keep them from trying to squat on my property. But it is so unsafe. I have men that cannot speak English in my front yard screaming at me, throwing mattresses in my front yard, throwing trash in my front yard, and I can't. Look at me, I weigh 95 pounds. I couldn't defend myself if I had to. My husband is elderly, and last night, after living in this home for 45 years, he said, Noelle, guess what? It's time to pack up and move.
Oh, that just breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. My goodness. And then, of course, in northern Ohio, there was the woman who was arrested for killing and eating a cat raw. I don't know, by the way, just for clarification, I don't know if she is a migrant or not. The headlines are not clear. It's still a problem. It's still a big problem, regardless of what her immigration status is. And wouldn't it be great if Trump brought these things up on the debate stage? All right, next headline today. Dick Cheney endorses Kamala Harris. That's not even the funny part of the story. The funny part of the story is Kamala Harris said she was honored by Dick Cheney's endorsement. And my question is, what part honors you, Madam Vice President? Because this is the same man that you've accused for the past 25 years, fairly credibly, of being a war criminal. So what part of this honors you? Is it because Dick Cheney loves war and you also love war? Oh, I think that we might have caught that. If I were Kamala Harris and Dick Cheney endorsed me, I'd be like, oh, I'm good. Let's just sit this one out, Mr. Cheney. But no, she's honored by this endorsement because Kamala wants to draft your daughters and send them to war to die in Ukraine over a border dispute with Russia. Okay, down in North Carolina, the RNC is suing the North Carolina Board of Elections. And this is also something Trump should pull out of his pocket during the debate tomorrow. In North Carolina, it is state law that if you vote by absentee ballot, in order for your vote to be counted, the envelope has to be sealed. The vote is not allowed to be counted if the envelope arrives unsealed. This is state law. But the North Carolina Board of Elections sent a directive to counties all across the state, instructing them to count absentee ballots even if the envelopes were unsealed. Now, let's be very clear here. That is contrary to state law in North Carolina, and the North Carolina Board of Elections has zero authority to unilaterally override a law that was duly passed by the state legislature. This is what President Trump should pull out of his pocket when he is giving evidence of the cheating and electioneering that the Democrats engage in. This is electioneering. They're trying to change the outcome of the election by changing which votes can be counted contrary to state law. They have no authority to do that. That is cheating. Period. 88 corporate leaders, this is the next headline, endorse Kamala Harris for president. 88 corporate leaders. It was so funny. The mainstream media acted like this was such a win for Kamala Harris. Oh my goodness, if all these business leaders want Kamala Harris, who are you to say no to her? Here's my challenge. Any enterprising young journalist who wants to go on the website of each and every business owned by these 88 corporate leaders, I more than suspect, I would bet quite a bit of money that every single business owned by these 88 corporate leaders has an ESG and DEI program. Check it out. Prove me wrong. All right, our next headline. An illegal alien from Peru, was arrested in Virginia for impersonating a police officer in order to kidnap a teenager. We have a major problem on our hands. We can kind of laugh about Haitian migrants eating ducks, about migrants in New York decapitating birds, about a woman eating a cat. But to impersonate a police officer in order to kidnap a teenage girl is the stuff of nightmares. And it can be avoided. This is not a fact of life. This is not something we have to just take in stride. This is not a risk that cannot be mitigated. This doesn't have to be this way. It is this way because of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and the left and their permissive invitation, their permissive border policy, open borders, and invitation for migrants to come here, and their refusal to deport anyone, even migrants that have a criminal record or who have been deported before. Again, Trump should bring this up. All right, guys, you asked for me to bring back my final points. Well, I have a final point for you tonight. It's not just politics that's corrupt and insane. It's not just politicians that are corrupt and insane. I sit here today, very sad to say to you that our entire country feels like it's in the grips of some kind of demonic force. From the transgender ideology being targeted at our children, to abortion, to critical race theory that tells white children that they are inherently racist because of the color of their skin, and tells black children that they are inherently oppressed because of the color of their skin, to other forms of Marxism and communism, to this anti-natalist, anti-child movement, to the celebration of hedonistic and often perverted sexual hookups, to the desecration of marriage. You look at this cultural landscape and you think, really, what is happening? Are politicians actually that powerful enough to wreak this havoc on us? Well, according to an exorcist named Father Chad Ripperger, the answer to that is no. Politicians are not powerful enough on their own to propagate the evil that we are seeing in our society today. According to Father Ripperger, there are 5 demons who are controlling our culture. And when you know what the demons are, it's chilling. Take a look at this.
Underneath Satan, there are what we call the 5 generals. The 5 generals are the 5 demons that are immediately hierarchically underneath Satan, and they are the ones who execute his plans. The first demon under him is Baal. His principal function is to get cultures to succumb to impurity, primarily through fornication. After that, then what happens is the culture, the next 3 demons show up. The first is Asmodeus. He's the demon of homosexuality in men. Then there's the demon of Leviathan, which is the demon of homosexuality in men, but of the masculine kind. These are the women who are heavy on the heels, we would say. Okay. Then there is the spirit of Lilith, which is the more seductive form of female homosexuality. Once you have fornication, you end up with contraception, and then the upshot of that is homosexuality and then abortion. Baphomet is the fifth one, and he's the demon of child sacrifice, abortion. In our culture, think of this. They shot down the fornication laws, and so they delivered us into the hands of Baal. Then they had Roe versus Wade and delivered us into the hands of Baphomet. And then they allowed gay marriage, and so now our country politically is in the hold of the top 5 demons in hell other than Satan.
And some of y'all wonder why we start our show with the St. Michael prayer every day. And that's my final point. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you haven't signed up for my newsletter, go to LizWheelerNewsletter.com. That's LizWheelerNewsletter.com. Don't miss our live coverage of the first presidential debate between President Trump and Kamala Harris tomorrow on BlazeTV.com. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.